Now, 20 years ago today, Princess Diana died in a car crash in Paris after being pursued by photographers. A range of public events have been organised to remember her death, and flowers, cards and other tributes are again being laid outside Kensington Palace. Her sons, Princes William and Harry, will mark the anniversary privately. Well, Simon McCoy is at Kensington Palace now. Simon.
Julian, thank you very much. Yes, well, a steady stream throughout the day have been coming and putting flowers at the gate where exactly 20 years ago today they did the same thing. 20 years ago, though, the flowers turned into a sea here at Kensington Palace. And what started a remarkable week in terms of how Britain dealt with the death of Diana, Princess of Wales. That shock news coming on the Sunday morning, turning to anger at the paparazzi, at the press, who many pointed the finger at in blame. That anger in turn turning during the week towards the monarchy and towards the Queen herself. But essentially it was about grief, the loss of a young woman, a woman described by the Prime Minister Tony Blair as the people's princess. This report now from our royal correspondent Nicholas Witchell.
The news had come in the early hours of the morning. Diana, Princess of Wales, had been involved in a serious car accident in Paris. As the world waited for news, the then British ambassador to France, Lord Michael Jay, was at the hospital with France's Interior Minister, Jean-Pierre Chevènement.
As time moved on, it became clear that it was more serious than we thought. And then Chevènement was taken out by one of the nurses, and he came back in tears, really, and came up to me and said, "I'm afraid she's dead."
Later in the day, the Prince of Wales arrived at the hospital to bring Diana's body back to Britain. It had been Charles who'd had to break the news to William and Harry that their mother had been killed. 20 years on, Lord Jay recalls the conversations with Charles very clearly.
He was clearly deeply moved by what had happened and talked a little bit about what it had been like in Balmoral that morning. He said how Prince William had wanted to go to church that morning, which was not, he said, something Prince William always wanted to do on a Sunday morning. So they had been to church, but throughout that day, that morning, he had wanted to do what he thought was in the best interests of two children who had lost their mother rather brutally.
It was a week when many people struggled, not least, says Lord Jay, the monarchy itself.
The nation wanted to share their grief, it seems to me, with someone, and the person they wanted to share their grief with was the Queen.
Lessons were learnt at the palaces, but most importantly, it is Diana's sons, now in adulthood, who appear to embody the style of monarchy people want for the future. Yesterday they looked at the tributes to their mother, which have been placed outside Kensington Palace. 20 years on, Diana's impact is still very real. Nicholas Witchell, BBC News.
Well, let's now go to the scene of that crash 20 years ago. Hugh Schofield is at the Pont de l'Alma in Paris. Hugh.
Capturing in a small way what it was like here 10 years ago on that anniversary, and of course in the days following the disaster 20 years ago. That is to say that this memorial, which was nothing originally to do with Diana, is actually celebrating Franco-American understanding, but it's been adopted as the Diana Memorial. And at the beginning, this was the scene of hundreds of people who would come and lay wreaths and flowers and cards and so on. I have to say, throughout the last few years, it's been deserted. A few people come every now and again out of curiosity, but in general, there's no one here. Today it's different. Today people are coming back, and as you can see, there's a steady stream of folks who I suspect are mainly tourists. In fact, I know they're mainly tourists. A lot of them have come off from the Bateau Mouche, the river cruise, see there's a bit of a hubbub over here, and come up to find out what's going on and discover, yes, it's the 20th anniversary. It was here, or right beneath where I'm standing, that she died, of course. The car that she was in was driving from the Ritz Hotel up to Dodi El Fayed's flat by the Arc de Triomphe, and they came careening into this underpass, glanced on the famous white Fiat Uno, which was coming in from a slip road, and then the car completely lost control and went into the 13th pillar. Afterwards, blame quite clearly attached to the driver, Henri Paul, who had drunk alcohol, who had taken medicaments and who was not qualified to drive the car. But of course that didn't stop the years of speculation and conspiracy theories about how she died. In the end, of course, it was all established very early on. It was drink in the driver's blood and speed. But as I say, this memorial has been here ever since today, something of a return, and it strikes me slightly, you know, symbolic of the way that she's now seen in the eyes of the world. See around the perimeter, all these locks, these love locks, and I've been looking at them. They don't have anything to do with Diana on them at all. They're love locks. They're people vowing their love to each other, like you see on the bridges here. And that, I think, reflects how Diana is, in the eyes of the world at least, becoming something of a kind of mythical, legendary figure. She symbolises love, celebrity, happiness, tragedy. She's become the tragic princess that we all know about.
Hugh Schofield in Paris, thank you very much. I want to talk now to two people who knew Diana directly, indirectly. First of all, Peter Waddup, who's National Director of the Leprosy Mission in England and Wales, and May Lloyd, whose husband started off in that job and got her involved in the first place. But Peter, I want to start with you, because you actually spent yesterday with William and Harry here.
I did, yes.
They have said that they will not be speaking anymore about their mother. Yesterday was the last moment, really, for them to pay tribute to her in a way that was public, because you were there.
Yes.
How would you assess how they've been the last couple of weeks leading up to this anniversary?
Okay, I think it's been an emotional time for them, but also a period where they've been able to set the record straight and give their views on how they felt about what happened 20 years ago and the impact it had on them. So I think that's been a really important time for them to be able to do that. But what was special about yesterday's meeting was we were meeting Prince William and Prince Harry, but in fact we were meeting two sons that just wanted to hear stories about their mother that they hadn't otherwise heard, and they knew that she was passionate about these select charities that were invited yesterday, and so it was great to be able to talk those things over with them.
And talk to me about her legacy in terms of what it means for your charity. I mean, I remember travelling with her to leprosy missions abroad,
yes,
doing things that nobody had done before, shaking hands, hugging people with leprosy. It changed the image.
Yes, it did. So the thing about people affected by leprosy is that there is a stigma. They are ostracised, they're discriminated against, people treat them as untouchables, and Princess Diana just decided, quite rightly, that was unacceptable, and she was going to cross over the barriers that were put up by some of the people that were escorting her, and she was going to go and sit on their bed, she was going to hold their hands, and she was going to show everyone that these are real people and deserve the attention of the world. And that's exactly what happened, because the very first pictures of her sitting on a bed with an epilepsy patient were beamed around the world, and that changed perceptions.
To a degree of what? I mean, what difference has it made to the leprosy mission now?
To a huge degree. So even a few weeks ago we had a medical elective return from Nepal to the Anandaban hospital, and they couldn't believe the effect that she was still having. They were speaking to patients that were coming back for maintenance treatment that were changed by what happened then, and public perceptions were changed. Those pictures when she was in Nepal were beamed around to millions of Nepalis, and suddenly leprosy was an acceptable disease. They realised it wasn't contagious just by touch, and that just changed attitudes.
May Lloyd, your husband Tony, late husband, was Peter's predecessor, and he was the one who said, I want her involved with the leprosy mission. How easy was it to get Buckingham Palace, who presumably shared these perceptions about diseases like this,
yes,
to go with it?
Yes, I mean, it was very prevalent in the UK that people were afraid of leprosy. So it was about a 12-month process after he wrote. Obviously, they had to check backgrounds and so on and decide how much she could be involved. But she was just so compassionate and so loving. It wasn't just shaking hands. She was prepared to get stuck in and hold people and talk to them. And she wept with them as well on occasion.
And there was a lot of cynicism around, but it was meant.
Yes, yes. I mean, I think you can't fake the kind of compassion and involvement that she had. She actually, on one occasion, when she was on a foreign tour, she came out of a hotel late at night and did a 20-minute interview on leprosy to the local media. And the regional manager of the leprosy mission was sort of dancing around in joy because it had done so much work. And of course there's a financial knock-on as well. And the money that she brought in has done untold good for thousands of people throughout the world.
Tell me about the Diana effect, the effect in a room where you're standing, however big the room is, you just know when she walks in.
Absolutely, her charisma was incredible. And on one occasion, I was with a small group of ladies that I'd been given to look after, and Diana was going to work the room, as it were, and come round. She came into the room, she came straight across to my group, and she said to one lady, "What's wrong?" And this woman said, "I've just lost my husband." Now, she'd spotted that across a crowded room from the doorway, and she'd honed in on it, and she was able to give comfort to that lady.
Peter, in terms of the legacy that charities like yours, the benefit that you have gained as a result of her involvement, can you put a price on it?
You can put a financial price on it because we have raised millions. I mean, it directly from her work when she was a patron, just over £1 million. We also benefited from the memorial concerts, etc., a further £1 million. But people admire Princess Diana for what she's done, so that's continued, and to equate that would be difficult. But it's not just the financial effect, it is the attitudes that have changed since and still are now.
And May, very briefly, your thoughts 20 years on. People here are paying tribute. It's a strange mood here in a way, isn't it? It's almost celebratory.
Yes, I mean, yes, we're terribly sad that her life was cut short, and we do feel for the family that they lost someone they love and you can't replace them. But whenever I think of her, there's a sort of joy there and, as you say, a celebration that she was able to do so much in such a short time for so many people.
Well, I'm most grateful to both of you for joining me. May Lloyd, Peter Waddock, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And if you want to know more about Diana's legacy, there's plenty more on the BBC website. Just go to www.bbc.co.uk. There it is on the screen, /news. And there's more there. Articles from our royal correspondent Peter Hunt about his thoughts 20 years on as well. But now, back to you, Julian.
Simon, thank you very much indeed. Simon McCoy there at Kensington Palace. Well, it looks a nice day in central London. Let's check on the prospects there and elsewhere. Nick Miller is across the newsroom. Hi, Nick.
Hi, Julian. Nothing's staying the same for very long today because you can have a nice day, you can have some sunshine and the cloud builds and a shower moves in. And there are some really hefty downpours, thundery ones, hail as well. I've just seen in Aberdeenshire, Fyvie Castle, 11 millimetres of rain just in the past hour. So some of the heaviest ones are in eastern Scotland, running through parts of northeast England as well. But once we get into tonight and after dark, they will fade away very quickly. And then we've got lengthy clear spells overnight, allowing temperatures to dip away again. So we show you town city centres, but away from these, you're going to be in single figures, mid to low single figures in some spots then as Friday begins. So a sunny start to September, but a chilly one. A dry start for most of us. There'll be a few showers developing as we go on through the morning, but they're not going to be as widespread in the afternoon as today, but more especially through parts of the Pennines, northeast England, the East Midlands, East Anglia. There'll be some slow-moving, thundery downpours once again. But away from any showers, away stay dry and get to see some sunshine, really quite pleasant. And a pleasant start to the weekend. Clearly, things are changing by the time we get to Sunday. And more about that just before the top of the hour.
This little vessel alone has rescued 30 people so far, and the situation is developing very quickly.
You can follow every moment in depth with BBC News. Get the full story at bbc.co.uk/news. And get the headlines as they happen with breaking news alerts in the app, wherever you are. Follow the story of Storm Harvey, everywhere on BBC News.
Hello, good afternoon. This is BBC News with me, Julian Warwicker, at just after 3:30. Here are the headlines. Europe's chief Brexit negotiator Michel Barnier says that no decisive progress has been made on key issues in talks with the UK team. The Prime Minister has repeated her statement that she's not a quitter after backbench MPs and some former senior Conservatives questioned her intention to lead them into the next general election. Residents have been evacuated as a precautionary move in the town of Crosby in Texas following explosions at a chemical plant flooded after Tropical Storm Harvey. A doctor from Romford has appeared in court charged with 118 sexual offences. Dr Manish Shah was granted conditional bail at Barkingside Magistrates Court. And tributes are being paid to Princess Diana, who died in a car crash in Paris 20 years ago today. Now time for the sport with Hugh. Hi, Hugh.
Hello, good afternoon, Julian. We're rapidly approaching the end of this summer's domestic transfer windows. Plenty of deals being done today. Premier League clubs are adding to that record amount they've already spent this summer. The former Manchester City and England midfielder Trevor Sinclair has joined us to discuss things. Trevor, we're going to start with your former club, City. They've put in a second bid for Alexis Sanchez, the Arsenal player. We believe that's around £60 million. If he does come, what's he going to add to the team?
Well, he's a world-class player for me. You know, you look at the players in the Premier League and when they're playing at their best, he'd be up there in the top three of most fans. Great signing, got lots of energy. I think for Pep Guardiola, plays exactly how he likes players to play, full of action. And for me, you know, it's a great signing and he will definitely add to that City attacking line.
Yeah, they've spent a lot of money this summer, though, haven't they? Nearly £300 million. Kyle Walker, Bernardo Silva's there, Benjamin Mendy. A lot of players. What's the expectation now from Pep Guardiola? He's going to have to go and win it all, isn't he?
Well, he's got to compete. I think he's got to be competing for the Premier League this year, getting far in the Champions League. But listen, the pressure was on him last season. When he arrived, everyone was expecting the best things. I think you look at it now in hindsight, he probably didn't have the squad that he needed to be able to have a real effect in the Premier League and win it. But now he's got the full-backs in place, which are a really integral part of Pep's teams. I feel he's got everything there going for him and he can go on and mount a real challenge for the Premier League.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about Arsenal just briefly. They could be losing their talisman, Alexis Sanchez. They've already lost Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain to Liverpool. That's been confirmed, £35 million. No real replacements being spoken about. Are they the biggest losers in this transfer window?
Well, you'd have to say yes, because you're talking about two players that can change a match. You know, both match-winning players. Ox, I think, when he plays, it's difficult getting him onto the pitch, but when he is fit and he plays, he's a match winner, simple as that. And obviously, we spoke earlier about Sanchez. I'd like to think, you know, for the fans' sake, for the players at Arsenal, that Arsene Wenger and the football club have got something lined up to bring someone else in. Draxler's been talked about, PSG. He's not really needed there now. They've got Neymar, and I think it looks like they're going to get Mbappe as well. So he might be surplus to requirements. So that would be a good signing, especially when you've got players like Ozil, who's obviously a German international. That would be a power for him to knock about with.
How much do you think the indecision over Arsene Wenger's contract, allowing Sanchez, Oxlade-Chamberlain, Mesut Ozil to get in the last year of their deals, has affected the way Arsenal have progressed over the last couple of seasons?
Yeah, well, as a business model, it's not great to see a player getting into his last year, especially with the way social media is now and clubs can contact agents. Illegally as it is, it happens, and we all know it happens. I'd like to see a change in the rule there where all players have got a buyout clause, and if you want to buy that player, you have to give that amount of money or offer that amount of money. But listen, they've got to have something in place. I think you look at the new managers that have come into the Premier League, Paul Clement, you look at Klopp, you look at Pep Guardiola. I feel players want to play for them players. And, you know, as much as I like Arsene Wenger and I think he changed the game in England, I feel a lot of managers are coming in now and superseding him, and players want to play for managers that excite them.
OK, Trevor, thanks very much for joining us. Big, busy evening ahead, I'm sure, for you and everyone here at the BBC Sports Centre. Thanks very much for joining us. Just before we go, though, a quick roundup of what has happened so far today. Spurs have signed the Ivory Coast right-back Serge Aurier from Paris Saint-Germain for around £23 million. Striker Nahki Wells, well, he's moved from Huddersfield to Burnley. That's for an undisclosed fee. The Portugal international midfielder Renato Sanchez has signed for Swansea. That's on a season's loan from Bayern Munich. And Liverpool's Divock Origi, the striker, is going on loan. He'll be joining Wolfsburg. But you can get full details of all of those transfer deadline day stories on the BBC Sport website. It's bbc.co.uk/sport. Mike Bushell will be here with more in the next hour.
Thank you very much indeed, Hugh. A doctor has appeared in court charged with more than 100 sexual offences. Manish Shah, who's 47, from Romford in Essex, is accused of sexually assaulting more than 50 people at a medical practice in East London. Our Home Affairs correspondent Daniel Sanford has the story.
This was the first time that the 47-year-old East London GP has had to attend court and answer the 118 charges of sexual assault he faces. Manish Shah has been charged with so many offences against 54 of his patients that it would have taken too long to read them all in court, so the Deputy District Judge just heard a summary. The doctor said he would plead not guilty to all the charges, one of which involves a child under 13. Throughout the time Dr Shah is accused of committing the offences, He was living here in a detached house not far from the surgery where he worked. The GP practice is in the London borough of Havering, but for legal reasons the media have been asked not to name it. The alleged offences all took place between June 2004 and July 2013, when the police investigation began. Manish Shah was released on bail and told he would stand trial on the 118 sexual offence charges at Snaresbrook Crown Court. The General Medical Council suspended him from working as a doctor 3 years ago. Daniel Sanford, BBC News, at Barkingside Magistrates Court.
More now on events being held to remember the 20th anniversary of the death of Princess Diana. Flowers, cards and other tributes are again being laid outside Kensington Palace. Her sons, Princes William and Harry, will mark the anniversary privately. Well, Simon McCoy is at Kensington Palace for us now. Simon.
Yes, thank you very much, Julian. Just as 20 years ago, people have been laying flowers here outside the former home of Diana, Princess of Wales, killed in that car crash 20 years ago to the day. This is how the news was covered then.
We are getting reports that Diana, Princess of Wales, has been badly injured in a car crash in France.
A short while ago, Buckingham Palace confirmed the death of Diana, Princess of Wales. The princess died following a car accident in Paris. She was 36.
They regarded her as one of the people. She was the people's princess. And that's how she will stay, how she will remain in our hearts and in our memories forever.
At 2:20 this afternoon, the one basic thing people in the crowds here had been calling for all week took place. The Queen came back to Buckingham Palace. As the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh came out to meet the crowds soon afterwards, it must have been one of the most difficult moments of her entire reign.
Silence from the mourners watching, the million who've come here to London, tears as he goes past. The Union flag raised and then lowered to half-mast. Another example of a breach of protocol in response to the public mood.
Diana was the very essence of compassion, of duty, of style, of beauty, and who proved in the last year that she needed no royal title to continue to generate her particular brand of magic.
This is the last anybody will see of Diana, Princess of Wales.
Well, you saw him in that montage there looking back at that week. He broke the news to 500 million people worldwide, Nick Gowing. And just your memories, perhaps of the hours before you knew what had happened, because it was middle of a Saturday night.
I should tell you the context, if I may, Simon. 24 hours earlier, I'd been in Japan at a karaoke party with Japanese diplomats. And that evening, we'd had a number of people in. We'd had a great sailing holiday in Greece. We drank a lot of Metaxa. So I was kind of karaoke lagged, beer lagged, Metaxa lagged. I got to bed at 12:30 and the phone went at 1:10. And it was my editor, Lucien Hudson, who's dead. Dodie's dead and Diana may be dead. Now, I used an expletive and said, don't wind me up at this time of the morning. but that was 1:10 and I was on air by 2:30.
So just describe the atmosphere. I mean, a newsroom, when a huge story breaks, is quite a place, quite an atmosphere.
Sure, but this was 2:30 in the morning, and BBC World was only at skeleton staff at that point, so the very small number of people. And those were the days when there wasn't the news channel, there wasn't News 24, and therefore a rolling channel for the BBC didn't really exist apart from BBC World, the international channel. So it was a very small number of maybe 2 or 3 people only, and a self-operated studio, and a director in my ear, and that was it, and a printer which didn't work. So many things didn't work, including the Deputy Chief Executive of BBC News. I said to him, can you come and fix my printer? Because I need to actually have something to read off. My real rocks were Stephen Jessel, our correspondent in Paris at the time. But remember, we had none of this. We didn't have mobile phones which could upload video or do WhatsApp or Instagram or all the other stuff we're used to now, which gives us the news in a matter of minutes from virtually anywhere in the world. Those days had not yet arrived, and so we were trying to piece together, based on a system which wasn't providing us information inevitably from the hospital in Paris, and also from Balmoral, and also from Clarence House. So we had to sort of fill with the basic of information that she was seriously injured, but was likely to recover.
What was that gap between you knowing that she died and telling people that's what had happened?
I think it's one of the things that all of us in our business have to prepare for. It's that moment when you know something's coming, but you can't actually reveal it. And we knew from Robin Cook, then the Foreign Secretary, he was on a trip to the Philippines, and Nicholas Witchell, the diplomatic correspondent, was there, and he was told, along with a number of other correspondents, that she was dead. They'd got the message from Sir Michael Jay, the British ambassador in Paris, and so we knew through what's called the BBC traffic system that she was dead. But it hadn't been confirmed by Buckingham Palace or Clarence House or the court. And so for about 50 minutes, Stephen Jessel and I were increasingly more somber as we waited, in effect, for the instruction that it was okay to announce her death. That actually came because the Press Association decided to snap, based on what Robin Cook had said, that she was dead, without sourcing it to him. And then we were able to make the announcement, sourcing it to PA, and eventually we were able to make the announcement officially as the BBC announcing it.
And then those following hours, because at that time of the morning everybody's tuning in, they know something's happened, they put the telly on. What was going through your mind? What was going on in the newsroom? Just describe it.
Well, everyone was trying to work out what was going on, and there were moments of panic, let me say, because there were people phoning in, 1 or 2 people who phoned in and said, I've seen the Princess walk away from this car crash. And at that stage we hadn't seen any video, and it seemed impossible. But there are people who, in this situation, as we all know in the news business, who seem to want to manufacture a version of what is happening which has nothing to do with the reality. And so these were the times of acute stress, let me say. And of course, as you know so well, Simon, and all our colleagues, you've got to get it right, because so many people around the world, are watching. And if you get it wrong, particularly for the BBC, that would be really something which one wouldn't want to sort of countenance on an evening like that. So we had to wait for good information. But in those days, the information systems were nothing like as sophisticated as they are now. And I was on air for a few hours during 9/11. And it was very clear then how much, that was only 4 years later, how much we saw, which was visible, and it was actually happening there in New York, almost like a Hollywood movie.
With Diana, you're talking about the death of a young woman, that we'd all followed for many years, directly or indirectly. Did it affect you personally? I mean, did you find it a struggle?
No, I didn't find it a struggle. I think, like the doctors who had to treat her when she was brought into hospital, like anyone in this situation, you have to act in a very professional way. And no, it wasn't a struggle. One of the newspapers today described me as stunned. I don't think I was stunned. It was one of those things where you want to be sure you are correct. I have to say, one of the things that came back to me, and I can talk about it now, I happened to be, during the Bosnian War, in the Intercontinental Hotel in Geneva, going up to see Radovan Karadzic from the Bosnian Serbs. I get into the lift, and the only other person in the lift is Princess Diana. What is your elevator pitch to Princess Diana as you're going from the 1st floor to the 7th floor to see someone who's in charge of a big war operation?
What did you say?
Good evening, ma'am.
Okay, now, when we're gathered here 20 years on, some events that you cover as a journalist stick with you forever. This is one of those without doubt for you.
It is indeed, and I'm quite remarkable, 20 years on, and I'm not really on air anymore, but people say we remember the night, not just because of today, but we remember the night. Can you tell us about it? It's a point of conversation. It is quite remarkable. It's stuck in people's memories, perhaps more than any other story.
And do you, when you were on television breaking a story like that, did you have in mind that maybe the televisions were on at Balmoral, that her family may be watching? I mean, what was going through your mind? I know you were sure the story was right, but what do you think about the audience at that point?
You have to think of that, and not just because of Princess Diana, but many is the time, and I'm sure you felt the same way, when you know you're broadcasting to people who are making judgments about what you say, because you are the BBC, whether it be in the United Kingdom or right around the world in war zones and so on. You have to get it right. But of course, The Queen, the movie of The Queen in 2006, has me and Maxine Mawhinney on air in Balmoral with the Queen and the Queen Mother and Prince Philip watching us, telling them what's happened to their daughter-in-law or former daughter-in-law. And also Tony Blair was in Sedgefield with his wife, and he's in bed, and he gets a call from Michael Jay, the British ambassador, and they turn on and we're giving primary information. I didn't think about that at the time, but it really underscores the fact that in that time we were a primary source of information at a time of crisis.
As a presenter, you're sitting there, and at the back of your mind, as a television journalist, is where are the pictures? What was the time lag between seeing the first devastating pictures of that Mercedes and having announced the news?
Well, it was quite critical actually, and you make a very important point, because as I say, this did not exist. If you can imagine people using this kind of thing over the Alma underpass, showing pictures of what the horror of what there was in the underpass with the Mercedes and so on, that would have been up there and out there on YouTube and FaceTime very quickly. We did not have that, and I think we were saved some very difficult judgments that evening, because it would have created massive problems. And as you know, all the stills from that period have disappeared. But many of the photographers taking pictures in Paris that night, and there is a bylaw in Paris saying you have to get permission to use a camera still. Many of them were arrested and taken away for many hours by the police. So for that time of, I would guess, about 90 minutes, we had no video, because in those days, not about uploading off a camera phone, you had to book a satellite feed, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, even 800 meters from the headquarters of French television, that's still pretty tough.
Nick, it's fascinating to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you,
Nick
Simon.
Gowing. And plenty more on this 20th anniversary of the death of Diana, Princess of Wales. It's all online, www.bbc.co.uk/news, an article there from Peter Hunt too on his thoughts about Diana's legacy 20 years on.